In lesson one, we talked about data and variables. Let's say that you have a study you want to perform. You've gone through and you've decided what information or variables you want to gather. Now we're set up. Now we need to actually gather the information. We have to collect our data. That's our topic of lesson two. And we're going to start off with a discussion of randomness. Now, remember this from lesson one. We talked about the difference between populations and samples. With population, we're measuring a parameter from the entire population. This is very difficult, very nearly impossible. So we decided instead we're going to measure a statistic from a sample. And a sample is just a subset of the population. Whole lot easier, much easier. And so we're going to collect this information from the sample, and from that we're going to infer information about the population. However, it's not quite as simple as that. There's a very important point that we need to talk about here. We have two questions. How do we choose a sample to properly represent the population? And how do we obtain the statistic for the sample? The second question, that's the topic for the next couple of videos. But in this video, we are addressing that first question. How do we choose a sample that properly represents the population? It would not be right if we sample one part of our population, but another part of our population is not represented. For example, we did some examples dealing with Snow College students back in lesson one. Would it be right if I sampled all the people on the Ephraim campus of Snow College and completely ignored Richfield and online students? That would not be right. We need to find a way to represent the entire population, everybody. So that's what we're going to address here. To eliminate errors in our study, these errors in our study are what we call bias, generally come from not properly representing the population. So in order to eliminate these errors or this bias, we need a random sample. What do we mean by random? Now, if I were to ask you right now, what would you say? I know a lot of students would probably say, oh, it means I just pick one here, pick one there, pick one there, and just not think beforehand. Let me illustrate to you what it truly means to be random. For something to be random, everything is selected purely by chance. That was the answer of pick one here, pick one here, pick one here. That's what that gets to, but that's not the end of the story. Everything's picked purely by chance. There is no predetermined selection of our sample. That would not be okay. Here's where it really gets helpful. Here's where randomness really comes in. Every member of the population must have an equal chance of being selected. Okay? For something to truly be random, then everything needs to be selected by chance, and every member of the population must have an equal chance of being selected. Those are both the requirements for something to be random. Why do we use random samples? Well, there are a lot of reasons. First of all, as we mentioned, we need to properly represent the entire population. Second of all, if it's not selected purely by chance, we may unintentionally favor one group more than another. Again, reporting bias. I may represent other parts of the population, but if I focus on one group, that will skew the data towards that group. So having a sample that is purely random will give the best coverage of the population, the best representation of the population, and it will avoid skewing the data towards one group or another. It will be pretty well balanced. And in the next video, we will look at a few different ways in which we can actually collect the data for our sample to study.